Good day, Australia, and welcome to Elk Radio. My name's Ian Kepplewhite, and this is Coach by Elk. Today we're here to talk about the 7 steps to money power. Oh wow, Ian, only 7 steps you say? Not quite. Each step has its own unique pathway, its own series of smaller steps that you've got to get to the bottom of. And not just know, you've got to be able to apply. And not just be willing, but you've got to execute. And when you start to do that, yeah, absolutely, those 7 steps into totality will deliver to you, your family, money power. So what are those 7 steps? Number 1, deal with the 4 main issues that Australian households face each day. Number 1 of that first step. People spend near most of what they earn. Have a look at your income. Look at your cash flow, how you direct that. Think about where that goes. Study your expenses. And you will see that people, in the most part, spend nearly most of what they earn, if not all. Can you save 17.5% of what you earn? Can you identify an ability to save 17.5%? And what can you do with that money? Can you put it to work for you? And if you can't, because one of the other issues facing Australian households is the cost of living pressures, which we'll touch on in a moment. If you can't, can you identify an ability to save, say, 7.5% just by cutting costs? Save 7.5% and put that money to work for you. How can you use that? How can you start to direct that with intention in your favor? So part 2 of the 4 main issues are the financial aspect, the financial issues. Tax, mortgage, and retirement. Tax. How much tax did you pay this week? How much tax are you going to pay this month, this year? Look at that. And then how many years have you got left working? What is it, 20 to 30,000 plus or more? Say $30,000 per annum for the next, 20 years? That's $600,000 in tax. So you earn the money. So let's look at it as a pie, a big circle. Let's draw a circle. And the first part of that circle, the first part of that pie, because you earn that money, that's your corporation. So that circle represents the income, the revenue for corporation U. That income, let's say let's call it $100,000 comes in. The first thing that comes out is tax. Of that tax, let's call it, say, $30,000. That goes out. And if that's going out each year for the next 20 years, that's $600,000. That's a big number. So how can you save tax? How can you access tax minimization advantages? How can you use those tax savings and put it to work for you? You need to be able to deal with that. Because the next thing that comes out of your pie is mortgage. So again, that big circle, the first part of the pie was tax. What's next is your mortgage, your accommodation costs. It might be rent or mortgage. And that might be $2,000, $3,000 a month, $36,000 a year for the next 20, 25 years. That's again a big number. How can you reduce that? How can you pay off that mortgage? The last tax-free asset being the owner-occupied home. So get out of that old bank debt trap. You better pay back that home loan debt, that mortgage, as quickly as possible. And then retirement. Well, retirement's the white elephant in the room because it's a big number. And if you look at what you need in terms of retirement provisions versus what you've got, in the most part, you'll find you've got a shortfall. You need to have a plan to deal with that. You need to have a plan to be future-proof. Because the worst thing that can happen is you actually outlive your savings. People retire at the age of, say, 65 to 67. They live for approximately 20 odd years in retirement. And if you look at what they need, the number sits perhaps in today's dollars between about $850,000 to maybe $1 million plus. That's in today's dollars. What are you going to need in 20 years' time? So we'll talk about that as part of our Coach by Elk series. Part 3 of the first step is consumer credit. Deal with and get rid of consumer credit. Credit cards, personal loans, easy pay, those buy now, pay later catches. Eliminate that from your world. And deal with consumer credit, that expensive debt that erodes and eats away at you, compound interest on the flip side in the bad way, working against you each day on the money's owed at a very high rate. That just makes it very difficult to get ahead. So eliminate and get rid of consumer credit. And as I touched on earlier, cost of living pressures. The cost of living is outside of your control. However, you can save money. You can be smart about it. You can be disciplined about it and look at how can I reduce costs and put that money to work. So step 2, strategy, structure, and solution. Have a strategy. You need a strategy. You need a plan. It can be a simple plan, and it should. And that simple plan should have a strategy, structure, and solution. How do you go about that? Well, firstly, look at your household as a corporation, Corporation U. It's therefore then where you look at it from a corporation, where you start to put the lens on and say, well, this is the business case. And let's look at it as a business case. So with that business case, what are my issues? What are my deficiencies? Where am I paying too much? Where are the holes or the gaps that I need to fill? And then when you look at that, when I said the lens before, the business case lens, make sure you have a total view. Don't have the blinkers on. Look at your total financial world. And your total financial world, and let's draw a circle again. We're going to be good at drawing circles by the end of this, I can guarantee it. Let's draw a circle. And then cut that circle like an apple right down the middle. And on the left-hand side, and let me take a step back, that circle represents your total financial world. And on the left-hand side of that left-hand half, is your personal world. Let's call that part 1.1. And then let's step over to the other side, the other world, the other half. That's your super financial world. Let's call that part 1.1a. Why are they named like that? Well, they're just as important as each other, though the two shall never meet. Not until at least you retire. So then, with your total financial world in view, we're up nice and high now, we can see the left and the right parts of your world. We then, as a business case, we'll treat it as a business case. We'll do a business case assessment. Where are your issues? Where are your expenses? Where are the deficiencies? And what can you do to fix that? Look at it from the numbers. And then after that assessment's done, start to build a plan. And that plan would start as a mud map. We'd map out what your pathways are, the options. And then how do you go about, with those pathways, fixing those issues? Because that should be the why. The entire why about this is not just to do something for the sake of it. It's to do something to deal with those issues and also get you to a certain point that delivers what you require. That's a strategy. And the structure is how it's put together. And the solution is the vehicle, the product that takes you there or helps you get there. And as part of that total financial world, things that we'll learn about and talk about are things such as a barbell portfolio. And when you look at your total financial world, and we've started to touch on the issues, tax, mortgage, retirement, and then we see what the needs are from that. Then we see what the capacities are and the affordabilities. And we start to put a plan in place that includes a structure. And that structure may be, as I said, a barbell portfolio. And that barbell portfolio, imagine we're at the Olympics, and let's just say that Tokyo occurs, and I hope so. Along with the European Football Championships this year, that would be a fantastic year. Throw the Tour de France in the middle. And you know what? I'm watching sports till late and working through the day. That's a great combination, along with doing everything else that running a business, having 5 kids involves. And lucky I've got a brilliant wife because, wow, without that, it just would not happen. So as I said, we're watching the Tokyo Olympics, and we've got a weightlifter, and that weightlifter's out there on the stage, and they might have small, short arms. Let's just say that that's the event that they're in, and they go about approaching that bar. And what we see on the bar, on the left-hand side, is the biggest weight on the bar. And that might be a direct asset. It might be an index asset, a traditional index asset that is allowed to do its thing over time. And on the right-hand side of the bar are the smaller weights. And those smaller weights are not correlated to the left-hand side. They are different types of assets. And they're the usual suspects. Those usual suspects of assets are stuff that you'll have in your own super fund at the moment, for example. Australian shares, international shares, listed property, fixed interest, and then some cash. And with those usual suspects, they're there to do a job for you. But with our barbell portfolio, what we're trying to achieve is a total financial world barbell portfolio. Where on the left-hand side of the bar, we've got assets that are direct assets or the largest weights on the bar that maybe, as I said, index assets, maybe a managed fund type or an index fund that is low cost, that's there to do a job for us, deliver a measurable outcome over time, and that we can grow. We need to grow that asset pool. And on the right-hand side of the barbell is those usual suspects: Australian shares, international shares, listed property, fixed interest, cash, whatever you typically see that is matching to your risk profile. But the asset allocation has to be right. And then we can look at other assets as part of that understanding of your asset allocation and your risk profile, because each of those assets is simply a bucket of money. And that bucket carries with it its own risk, its own return, and is there to do a job for you. So in totality, we look at what we need to achieve, how we'll go about doing that using a strategy and a structure that may include a barbell portfolio. And there's a whole section we'll talk about and drill down on that and what it looks like and give some examples and go from there. So part 2, step 2, is strategy, structure, and solution. You need to have that. Let's go on to step 3. Good debt versus bad debt. So with good debt versus bad debt, that speaks for itself. Good debt is things that are tax deductible, that have an asset attached, that are there to help you get ahead. And one way to have good debt is to be able to borrow with a borrowing strategy and do a thing called leverage, where you have a bit of deposit or equity and you use that to acquire an asset you otherwise would not be able to. That grows your asset pool to a point where having that value, say of $400,000 or $500,000, if that was the example, you've been able to borrow and acquire an asset that might be direct property, say, where you only had maybe $100,000 deposit or $100,000 in available lending value or equity, then that allows you to integrate an asset you otherwise would not be able to. That's good debt. Of course, there's income from that, there's tax deductions that flow from that, and there's access to open market forces. And those open market forces are things such as capital gains over the medium to long term and increase in the income versus bad debt. Bad debt's when you use that for consumer purposes, or bad debt in the form of mortgage against your own occupied home, which has no tax benefit. And then let's go back to that circle, that pie we drew at the start. And that pie where there's $100,000 of income and the first thing that comes out is tax. And then the mortgage. So if tax comes out first and then your mortgage comes out, does that mean you're paying your mortgage in after-tax dollars? Yes, it does. So you're paying the interest rate of the bank plus the rate of the tax. That's the total cost of funds that have been allocated towards payment of your mortgage. So it's more expensive than you know, more expensive than you think. That's why it's bad debt. And then on top of that, as compared to good debt, you've got, looking at that pie, you earn the money, you pay the tax. You then pay the mortgage or the payment for the good debt, but you get some tax back on that. Of course, it's tax deductible, say investment or business debt. In this instance, we'll call it investment debt. So tax deductible investment debt. So you pay the money and then you get some tax savings back on the interest you've paid. So that means that the true cost of funds is cheaper. It's saving you tax and bringing down the cost of that money to make it a lower cost debt, a good debt on top of the other reasons I gave just earlier. Now, people think, well, how do I get to that? And one way to do it is through debt conversion. Paying down bad debt, smashing it, putting as much resources as you can, your cash flow, all that income you earn from personal exertion, and putting it towards the reduction of that bad debt. One way to do that is with your home loan, for example. Are you putting all your available income through and against that facility? One way to do that is with an offset account. So interest on loans is calculated daily and debited monthly. So the more cash flow more regularly you put through and against that loan, the less interest you pay. Because at the moment, when you've got bad debt, that compounding of interest is working against you. Interest is calculated daily and debited monthly. And it continues for 30 years, 360 months. So can you each month, every chance you get, reduce that interest cost and try and save some of that money to be paid down your debt more quickly? And one way to do that is direct all your income and all your cash flow through an offset account attached to your home loan. that is a fully transactional 100% offset account attached to your home loan that helps you start to claw back and save some of that interest. And then any savings you've got, whether it's $5,000, $500, whatever it is, park it there. Because an offset account certainly works with the benefit of cash sitting in an account, but cash flow can also assist. Having money sit there and stay there for as long as possible before it has to be used again. Rather than having, like a lot of people seem to have, is their transactional bank account at one bank and they go, well, that's my pay goes, that's my account, so that's my bank. And I've got my home loan elsewhere. Might have an ING bank account, everything goes, and I've got a home loan at, say, NAB. Get them connected. You can't do that in the way it is, where one bank has a savings account, another bank has a home loan. The only way you can truly get an offset account in place is from the provider of your home loan if they offer that facility. But using an ING account to identify expenses and be able to manage your money, that makes sense. And to save on bank charges and fees makes sense. But can you then push it through there and into an offset account and have it sitting there and working for you as much as possible? So we'll talk about that. Each of these steps we're going to go through in detail as part of our Coach by York program. So what's next? Grow your asset pool. So step 4 of 7 steps to money power. Number 4, grow your asset pool. Why wouldn't you? When you can and as you can, why wouldn't you take reasonable steps that are creditworthy and appropriate to your circumstances to grow your asset pool? Because what, you don't need to? You've already got enough? Come on, seriously. You need to be financially mature enough to identify what your numbers are, know your numbers, and be smart enough to be able to identify, well, wait a second, if I don't know how to do that, how do I get the help? And then be able to take and brave enough, because if you're listening, and most people are positive people, especially in Australia, we're positive people that want to get ahead. We want to have a go, we want to have a good life and be future-proof and have the life we deserve. Well, to do that, you've got to grow your asset pool, because if you don't, the age pension is an amount of money that will give you very limited choice and options when it comes time to retire. And as it progresses over time, that number I'd expect would shift, and the ability for you to support yourself is more important, is very important. So grow your asset pool. How? Well, look at how you can, especially at the moment. We've got a surge in house prices. And that doesn't mean you take steps that aren't appropriate, but it means if correctly done and with the right approach, it allows for positive wealth effect. It allows for you to be able to go and take steps to grow your wealth. And especially when you've got the timeliness of the situation at the moment, where rates are so low, interest rates and borrowing costs are so low. So there's still bad debt and good debt in that situation, but the rates are lower, meaning it works in your favor. Then combining that with the fact that rental yields are very high, we're at 5% plus. And when we have a business case assessment anyway, our rental yield we work on is, the Australian average is 4.5%. So anything above the 4.5% is above average. And anything above 5% is great. So we work towards a benchmark of 5% plus, or 5% plus minus as a benchmark, and then 5% plus to try and outperform. So what's that? Well, a 5% rental yield is, let's say the value of the asset is $500,000. A 5% rental yield is 5% of that in a per annum, expressed as a per annum figure. Divide that by 52 and you'll start to get a rent per week figure that makes a lot of sense to you. So with rental yields very strong, at say 5.5%, and borrowing costs at say 2%, well, you can see that the rent covers the interest, and then we'll go very close to covering the principal interest repayments. And if it's a balanced investment vehicle and done properly, well, there's going to be tax savings as well. That's going to help along the way. Looking at your situation, you may be able to get tax back in your pay. If you're an employee that gets your tax taken out regularly, you may be able to lodge a PAYG 1515 tax variation form that allows you to get tax back in your pay. How's that work? Well, you pay less tax each pay. And it's like lodging a mini tax return at the start of the year, or when you when you're in a position to receive that benefit. If there's enough time left in the year to benefit from it, otherwise you just wait to the end of the year and start again. But it's something you should be doing. So grow your asset pool needs to be done right, and it needs to be diversification. You need to have a plan. So as part of your plan, is it a strategy that's built around a barbell portfolio where On the left-hand side of the bar, can you grow your assets that are the biggest weights on the bar, a mixture of index funds, low cost, and direct assets that have the time, that are given the time they need to do their thing. And on the right-hand side, those usual suspects, the things I've talked about just earlier, where there might be some specialist managers, where they are the best in the business. And you've got to be careful not to pay people to try and outperform the market, because that doesn't happen on a regular basis, outperforming the market. But managing correlation, so having different assets doing different things exposed to different risks over time, and specialist managers to do that, as long as costs are considered, that makes sense. And what would be great is to get to a point of where it's 50-50, where on the left-hand side of the barbell and the right-hand side of the barbell, you've got a mix of direct assets, and on the right-hand side, that mix of highly liquid type assets, because when it comes time to retirement and retire, you're going to need liquidity. You're going to need cash or cash equivalent assets that you can easily convert to cash to help fund your retirement income needs. But you want to have the ability and need to have the ability for assets to be still at work and working for you and delivering a return and or growing. And if you've got a mixture of say 50-50 or thereabouts, 50% on the left-hand side, that might be some direct assets, maybe some direct residential property assets. Well, they're an illiquid asset that takes perhaps 3 to 6 months to sell. At the moment, they're selling much quicker. And that's something that needs to be considered, because property generally, if it's direct property on the left-hand side, the longer you hold it, the better. And 10 to 12 years plus, and RP Data put out a report a little while ago that talked about 20 to 21 years being the optimum period from that analysis to hold property. Now, there's going to be a time when you need or should consider selling property. But if you've got liquid assets on the right, that allows you to be in control, when to pull that trigger and to do it at the right time. But don't just jump to that, because one of the steps down the line is to create an income for life. So you need to be able to have an income, and that income may come in the form of rent or through investment. So when you've got an asset worth $500,000 or $600,000 invested, and the return some 5 or 6% return, that helps deliver you the income you need, as long as any borrowings are considered and hopefully paid down over the time. One way to pay down borrowings would be, if on the left-hand side of the barbell you've got a collection of assets, you might dispose of one or two to clear the debts on others, to put you in that position. Tax considerations, all those things have to be thought about at that point in time. So, step 5, cut fees and reduce costs. Yeah, that sounds good, Ian. How do I do that? Well, you need to look at an analysis. So you need to study your position and look at each of your products and see from there how you can reduce costs, cut fees, including product manager fees, as well as interest and bank charges. So managing fees, managing costs is a very important part of your plan. Now with that, consideration of costs and the appropriateness of costs is also equally as important. There are sometimes layers of fees, where if you have a self-managed super fund, for example, you have some compliance costs and keeping it in place and alive costs, such as an annual tax return, ASIC, or annual proprietary limited renewal costs. And then you might have the ability to invest your money. So you look at a platform. So can you look at the right platform that is considering costs, and then any funds you invest, that may also carry a cost. So how do you manage that and make sure you get that right, and always look to cut fees and reduce costs where you can. Step 6. This is an important one that you need to be thinking of right from the start. How do you create an income for life? And use compound interest. Use and reduce the effect of compound interest. So create an income for life and reduce the effect of compound interest. So to create an income for life, you need an asset pool that's going to deliver you an income, or that can be converted into an amount investable to be able to create an income. Can you create a passive income? An income for life is going to require that, because you can't trade time for money for all your life. You need to be able to grow an asset pool that creates an income for life for you. So you are future-proof. And then use compound interest. How can you save 7.5% of what you earn and put that away and keep it away and let it compound over time? The rule of 72 is if money is invested and receives an average return of, say, 7.2% per annum each year, and that's continually invested, compounded, then what will happen is that will double. That initial amount will double every 10 years. So the rule of 72, remember that. $100,000 at 7.2% each year for 10 years is $200,000 in 10 years. 200 becomes 420. 400 becomes 808 in the 40 years' time. You need to be able to use the benefit of compound interest, and where you've got borrowings, reduce the effect of it because you don't want to outlive your savings. And that's an important consideration. Certainly live for as long as possible, but don't outlive your savings. And then step 7, manage it, measure it again, and enjoy it. So you need to manage it. This is not just a set and forget. You can't just put it in place, give it to someone else and go, yeah, you look after it. No, you need to own it. You need to change your behaviors and look at it and understand what's going on or have an interest in it. If you don't, at least try to. Or try and get access to information about what's going on. Or ask someone and regularly contact or be in contact with them to help you with that. But manage it and measure it and then keep on managing it. But enjoy it. If you don't, then it's going to be a hard slog. Enjoy it. Find something that's of genuine interest to you. Have a look at, well, maybe it's the returns you like to interest in, or maybe it's the managing my expenses. Maybe it's managing my cash flow. Actually, I find that if I'm across it, I understand it. If I'm understanding, I'm enjoying it. Maybe I don't like having to do the transfers all the time, but you know what? I don't mind it. And then be environmentally, socially, and mutually responsible. So this world needs that. We need to think like that. And we need to demand that from everyone we deal with, especially the corporations with the power. So 7 steps to money power. There's more to come. I hope you've enjoyed this. Look forward to being in contact. And moving forward, what we'll do is we'll draw down now as part of our coaching program on each of those steps and how to get there and what you need to do and what it looks like and what you can put in place to achieve that. Okay. I'm Ian Kebwhite. This is Coach by Elk. Have a great day. Cheers.